So I was sitting in the synagogue and I was listening to all these stories of slavery and genocide and hatred, children being killed for who they were. And it all sounded so familiar. And
This is horrible. Why are we letting this go on? Why are so few people here?
It just struck me as, undescribable, like, how is this still happening? So,
Yeah, what is going on? And after that, I started reading the news, and I wrote a petition for my school, and then we started a club.
my name is Sabine, and I'm actually named after Bina, who was my Nana's cousin, who died at age 12 in a concentration camp in the Holocaust. So she brought up my whole life knowing that I existed for her memory, that I was named for her memory of someone who had lost to genocide.
Realize that, this is the kind of situation that could occur on the ground in the U.S. It could happen between you and me. It could happen between our neighbors, anybody. Any kind of divide could be invented, and your neighbor could be killing you the next day.
I saw some documentaries, and when you put a face to what's going on, you're really affected. And I looked at numerous ones then. Honestly, I cried while I was watching them.
And I realized right then and there that I couldn't sit down and let another Bina die.
And it doesn't matter if you're from a really small town that doesn't have a clue where the country of Sudan is. It doesn't matter if you're from a large city that's very politically charged. Everyone has something they can do, and the best thing to do is educate yourself and educate, those around you.
I have a say in what my government does. So I was moved to support our government and what they're doing in Sudan and try to push them to do more. Wow, I can actually do something now for the genocide in Darfur.
I'm alive and I live for the memory of someone who was killed in genocide, and I'm alive to help prevent more people from being killed in genocide. So.
We want to make sure that our elected officials know that in all the states represented in here and in all 50 states across our nation, that there are students everywhere, thousands of students mobilizing on behalf of the people of Darfur.
So we're going to focus on, what most broadly, what we can do, what the United States government can do about genocide. Specifically, what are we asking from Congress right now?
These people are our servants. They work for us, right? Our members of Congress work for us. And that's a paradigm shift that's kind of hard for some people to grasp, because senators and representatives, these are like powerful people, right? These are like the big shots. And so, it's sometimes hard for us to realize that actually they work for us and they're accountable to us.
Basically, we're looking at three categories of things that the United States government can do to stop a genocide. Military intervention. In the case of Darfur, we're advocating for multilateral intervention through a hybrid UN-AU force. Sanctions, use economic pressure, divestment. Probably a lot of you guys have been involved in divestment.
But divestment is literally the opposite of investment. It's just removing your assets from and making sure that your money is being removed from supporting the Sudanese government. Because in the status quo, a lot of our money, unfortunately, is going to companies that support the Sudanese government financially and thus affect the genocide in Darfur.
And use diplomacy. So both use the United States connections that the United States has with the genocidal government, and use international institutions like the UN, like the ICC, to put diplomatic pressure on the genocidal government.
But first, let's look at the Darfur Accountability and Divestment Act. Essentially what it does is it ensures that U.S. money is not going to fund the genocide in Darfur.
We know that Sudan has repeatedly failed to respond to diplomatic pressure. They've shown us they will sign the Darfur peace agreement, not do anything about it, not stick to their agreements.
And it authorizes and protects states that divest to do just that, to remove their money, to divest, to remove their money out of worst offending companies that are supporting the government in Khartoum, and whose then 70 to 80% of the money received by the government of Sudan then goes into military expenditure, which is the money to pay the John Dewey militias, for the anti-tank planes, for the AK-47s.
They will say that they will allow a peacekeeping force in, and then fight over the terms of the peacekeeping force, fight over the details, delay, stall. So we know that Sudan is really good at doing that. We also know that historically they've been very responsive to economic pressure. There are a lot of great examples of that in the past. Given that, economic sanctions in this case are one of the most important tools that we can use to influence the Sudanese government.
The other thing is, and this is going to be true for both the Senate in the House kind of on a continual basis, and that is appropriation.
Appropriations. We talked before, Congress has the power of the purse. That's one of their biggest responsibilities and biggest powers in terms of impacting what's happening on the ground in Darfur and how the administration responds to it.
Appropriations is just money. You know, as Sam pointed out, the U.S. provides the bulk of money for the United Nations, as you said, for the equipment for peacekeepers, for humanitarian aid sent to Darfur. But I really want to stress the civilian protection aspect. Unless we can really get the civilian protection force on the ground, you know, we aren't going to see peace in Darfur.
The other big ask for representatives right now is Genocide Accountability Act, HR 2489.
Currently, there's a loophole, which is really absurd in our country, where, you know, if someone like Carlos the Jackal or any other like high-level, you know, well-known terrorist from another country comes into U.S. territory, they will be prosecuted and usually extradited to that country, or to the country in which they committed terrorist acts. But that's just because people are so concerned with terrorism at the moment. Right now, if someone who's committed genocide or ethnic cleansing in their own country comes to the United States, there's no current way to prosecute that person.
Essentially, I mean, you can see right here, this bill would essentially help give teeth to the U.S.'s signing on to the Genocide Convention.
So this bill, the Genocide Accountability Act, closes that loophole. And it guarantees that if someone like Omar al-Bashir or Saleh Dosh or another member of the Sudanese regime were to come onto U.S. property, they would be prosecuted and punished accordingly.
STAN students across the country for about the last month or so have been meeting with senators.
So when we make our meetings, usually we're talking to their staff person, right? Someone on their staff. And usually it's somebody who's dealing exclusively with foreign policy, right? So we're usually, when we reach out to members of Congress, we're talking to a foreign policy legislative assistant, FPLA.
Hi, thank you so much for meeting with me
Yeah, nice to meet you, Alexa.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me.
Well, yeah, the senators wants to do everything he can.
Yeah, you know, we're definitely glad to hear that. So like I told you, I'm from Swarthmore Stand, which is a student organization of about 25 people at Swarthmore College.
Okay.
Stand is actually a national organization. There are about 700 chapters, including about 35 in the state of Pennsylvania.
The more you can be connected with a constituency, the better your message is going to come across.
So it's definitely an issue that's had a lot of saliency for Pennsylvania voters. In particular, you can look at the divestment legislation that recently passed the Pennsylvania House as further indication of the importance of this issue.
You know, the approach is explaining who you are, explaining why you specifically care about the issue.
So we know that the senator has been very supportive of Darfur legislation in the past, and we're definitely appreciative of that.
You know, the first thing we want you to say here in your lobby meeting is thank you for all the things they have done, right? Thank you for signing on to XYZ letter, and that'll put the idea in their mind that if they do something good, right, you'll actually notice, right? Whatever they do, you'll actually notice. So stating the record is really, really important.
Are you up to speed on the latest developments of what's happening in Darfur?
I know there's a genocide going on, and it's been going on for a couple years. So yeah, I know.
Sure.
Being a good messenger, giving the right information to these people, right? So, as I said, these people are slammed. They are so busy. They don't have time for Darfur. They don't know a lot about Darfur usually. And so you can be a great information source.
Yeah, definitely. Well, here's a couple editorials from the Philly Inquirer.
The Philly Inquirer.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, okay.
And that talks a little bit about some of the more recent developments. Basically, what we keep seeing is that the Sudanese government, time and again, shows us that they can evade attempts to get peacekeepers into Darfur. They can evade attempts to, get an effective peace agreement negotiated and implement it. So that's what that article touches on. I also actually have for you a couple of photos of an event we did with this church in town last week.
And this was in Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
Oh,
it was in Swarthmore, actually. This is the Episcopal Church. I don't know if you've ever been out to the... Yeah.
Yes, I've been there once.
Right,
Okay.
sure.
The senator is such a believer in civic participation.
Oh, it's wonderful, isn't it?
Taking part in the democratic process, and so it's just we love it.
Wonderful. It's wonderful. Well, then what you'll really love is what I have for you next, which is a copy of the bill, the Darfur Accountability and Divestment.
Okay.
And I know that the senator did co-sponsor the Sudan Divestment Authorization Act recently. which is great to hear because the legislation that I wanted to talk to you about is actually similar to that. It's called the Darfur Accountability and Divestment Act. It just passed in the House in July. I don't know if you're familiar with it
Rings
at
a
all.
bell.
Okay, sure. Well, I actually brought a copy of the bill, and also a fact sheet if you'd like that as well.
Oh, thanks.
Basically, the Sudan Divestment Authorization Act would protect cities and states, like the city of Pennsylvania, that divest from companies doing business with Sudan. DADA takes that and then some. It would help ensure that we're cutting off all the, more of the ways that the Sudanese government is getting access to U.S. capital.
Okay.
So, for example, in addition to protecting cities and states who divest, it would also protect asset managers who divest and prohibit future federal contracts with any companies that are fueling the genocide in Sudan.
Okay.
So it's really, it's a strong statement. It says, we're not going to put our U.S. money towards genocide.
Okay.
We're going to, cut off all those channels of access.
Right.
And we're going to, by doing that, pressure the Sudanese government to stop sponsoring these atrocities and to accept and implement a peacekeeping agreement.
Okay.
So it's definitely a strong piece of legislation that we hope the Senator will support.
I guess, are there any other questions that you have for me or anything that I could do to help demonstrate to the Senator, the support for this bill in our district?
I just thank you for coming in.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what the Senator will say, but I'll definitely bring all this stuff to him. And so, yeah, thanks a lot for coming in today.
Great. Yeah. Well, listen, I don't know when you'll have a chance to talk to the Senator, but maybe if I give you a call back next Friday, for example?
That would be
you
great.
Around?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So maybe around the afternoon, 2 o'clock or so?
2 o'clock. I'll put it in my BlackBerry.
My contact info. And I already have yours.
Okay, right.
So I look forward to talking to you next week once you've spoken to Senator Spector about it.
And, okay, I will talk to the Senator about that.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, have a great day, Alexa.
Take care.
One meeting will not do much. It will not do much at all. If you want your meeting on Monday or your meeting when you're back home to mean something, you have to follow up.
These are going to be awesome. You want to focus on data and on appropriations. Again, the most important point you're making is that you are here as a constituent representing lots of constituents. Remember, we all went over this hopefully this weekend in advocacy trainings. You're representing a lot of people who all care about this, and you are here to bring that message to them. Okay, if you have any questions, come talk to me. Good luck. Bring your forms back before you leave.
It went real well. I talked with William Wagner, and he wasn't very didn't know much about the topic about data, but he was very interested in having, because Spector has a very good record with Darfur, and he was very interested in having him vote for data, and he was a little upset about how the U.S. hasn't given the $725 million for UN and AU peacekeeping troops.
I'm actually kind of frustrated right now because being from South Carolina, there's not been a lot of support in divesting from companies that are heavily invested in Sudan, and that's what we are pushing today. Darfur Divestment and Accountability Act, HR Bill 180, and I met with Senator DeMint and Senator Graham's representatives, and they just didn't show that much interest or support. They kind of brushed us aside, saying, well, we get a lot of other humanitarian organizations visiting us every day, basically putting me on a level with them, saying, you're just one of those, and we're probably not going to do much because we have a different agenda. Well, I met with 2 other people, and we weren't, we never practiced beforehand, and so we kind of had a conversation with him instead of laying out everything. We just threw things at them, and it was really disorganized, and I think that if it was more formal and organized, they might have, I think they got a little overwhelmed. It went really, really well. I was really pleased. I met with Senator Bond from Missouri, and I met with his legislative correspondent, and he wanted to be very concise and with his words and make sure he didn't misspeak, but he said that in the very near future we'll be very pleased with Senator Bond's actions, and that there are some possible things in the works that he could release information to us now, but that he's definitely not shy and will be really pleased with what he chooses to do. So I'm excited to see what happens.
Well, I actually went to lobby Senator Enzi's FPLA and research assistant, and these 2 women were extremely knowledgeable of the situation in Darfur, which made my job a lot easier. I was really nervous going in there. they were, not only were they very educated, but they did care about the cause of Darfur. And they told me a little bit behind the scenes of what Senator Indy has done, which is really great because reading the Darfur report cards, my senator got a D, and because he didn't co-sponsor a lot of these legislations, and he hasn't done a lot of work with that.
I had a great experience. We spoke with the legislative assistant, me and my friend Stephanie, who's on the e-board of our stand chapter in Rhode Island. We were very responsive, took everything into account that we had to tell him, didn't rush us, didn't make us feel uncomfortable at any moment. Really personable relationship we had with him. We hit it off right away. He really wants to get involved. He asked us to send an itinerary of all the events we're doing at Stand.
I met with the legislative assistant, Nathan Reese, for Senator Inhofe, who's my senator. And I was just it was so awesome because it's the first time I've ever lobbied for something. And they told me I'd be lucky if I got 5 minutes, and that was going to be a really cool deal. But I actually got 22 minutes with him, and he just kept asking me all these questions. Now, how's China involved, and what, all these different questions about the different aspects of the genocide. And I'm so excited and just, I feel so empowered, like I actually did something, and it's not such a big, scary thing once you do it, so.